so much for joining. This is awesome. I'm so glad we have a good turnout. I heard from a few people, so we should have a couple more join us here. Who wants to kick us off? We can just start. Somebody can throw a question out there, and we could take it from there. So I'll leave it to you guys.
I'm curious about cold emails, framing cold emails, messaging cold emails, the research and targeting. Let's see, the CEO of a company or top people in the company with cold emails. And what's the most effective way to get the attention in the email? What are the expectations around getting a response, and how to engage in that way to get to those people so you can have the conversation and find out what the company needs and where I could fit?
Yeah, definitely. So I think it's a great question, because cold email is, it's one of my favorite things to talk about. I think it's one of the most important aspects of not only the job search, but business life in general. So if you're targeting people who are really, really busy, influencers, high profile guys, girls as well, you want to do a couple things. The best thing you can do to start off the bat is look for a mutual connection of some kind. So it could be a person, who could introduce you. It could be you guys went to the same school, you were in the same sports conference, you worked at the same company a while ago, you attended the same event. Maybe they spoke and you were in the audience, or anything like that. Any type of connection you can latch onto is a great start, because it helps build the relationship, rather than you can fire off emails and just say, I'm reaching out of the blue. If you have to, but if you can lead with something, some point of commonality, that's a great place to start. The second thing I'd recommend is offering value without asking for something back first. So typically, we can send out emails and be like, hey, I want to have a conversation with you. Are you free? But people like that get a lot of those emails, right? So for me personally, like, I get emails every day from somebody I've never met before who hits me up on LinkedIn, and they're just like, hey, here's my resume, review it. And I'm like, that's what I do. I have a website for that, but like, I don't even know you. And we don't have a relationship, and reviewing resumes takes time, right? So it's much better if that person leads and says something like, hey, Austin, I know that you're doing office hours, and somebody asks you about cold email. Here's a cool article I just read about it, that had some points that I haven't read about before when discussing cold email. And maybe you want to incorporate that into an article or your next answer or something like that. I'm definitely going to respond to that. And then following up, you can say, hey, by the way, if you have any time, I'd love to chat, or, I'd love to ask you a few questions over email. So I always recommend leading with value, depending on, and it may take a couple tries, right? Like, you may send one email. They may not get back to you. They may, but just keep sending emails like once every couple weeks until somebody responds. And I'd also recommend using the email tracker so you can gauge whether or not they're getting back to you. So my rule of thumb is that if you have the email tracker going and you see them open the email multiple times over multiple days, then you at least know they're interested. For me, I manage my inbox. I don't always get back to emails immediately. I try to, but when I'm not able to get back as quickly as I can, I usually read them, then I mark them as unread again. And then I'll do that like 3 or 4 times over the course of a day, just so I'm formulating an answer in my head. I know what I'm going to say when I actually sit down to write it. So if people are busy, right? So as long as they're opening your emails, they're engaging with them, I would continue to follow up. A good rule of thumb for somebody pretty high profile is to start with maybe every 10 days or so. And then once you have that first point of contact, you don't want to get too crazy. So I'd actually back it out to maybe once a month, once every couple of weeks. So then you reach out to them, and one of two things happen. Either they don't get back to you, or they do. If they do, great. If they don't, when you're following up, every probably the third follow-up email, I try to up the stakes in terms of the value that they're driving. So it does take a lot of research to really get good at this and to really get in contact with people who are super, super busy. So if you're, let's say, like, you're trying to get in touch with somebody like an Ariana Huffington, for example. So we're talking like way at the top of the ladder. She's very public. She has posts out there. She does interviews. She has books, blah, blah, blah. So keep up with her. Like, comment on the posts that she throws out there. Comment on the videos that she throws out there. Send her an email. Try to introduce her to somebody. Like, understand what her goals are, what her pain points are. For example, maybe she's like opening a store in New York and you're like, hey, I live in New York and I can drive, 20 of my friends into the store. And then you can send her an email and say like, hey, I got 20 of my friends together. We went and got coffee. We checked out the store. A couple people bought stuff. I just want to say you're doing awesome things. Keep up the good work. And you're leading with that value, but you stepped up the game a little bit. You're a couple emails in and you're continuing to drive value. If you do that, like, you're 100% going to get noticed. I see this happen all the time across other people who are running online businesses. They'll end up hiring somebody who's in the Facebook community who actively got out there and fielded questions and like bubbled up new articles and things like that. And I see kids in college getting in touch with these major high profile influencers because they're not concerned about like the money or the reciprocation just yet. They just think it's so cool to be in contact with this amazing person. And I think we kind of lose that when we get into the professional world because we're much more concerned with our salary and our career path and all this stuff. So I would just like try to be a kid again, think about like how to wow this person, and then just space out your emails and just keep firing them off until they either stop responding, tell you to shut up and leave them alone, or they respond.
An email tracker.
Mm-hmm.
I heard all that, by the way. I'm taking it all in. The email tracker, is that a separate piece of software?
Yeah. So there's a couple out there. There's one, if you type in Google HubSpot email tracker,
okay, that's
a free one. I think you get like 200 messages a month with that. The one that I personally use is called Yesware. It's about $12 a month. And I really like it. It's a little bit more robust, but it does run you the $12.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay. Thank you for offering, or thank you for answering that. That definitely gives me some stuff to think about.
You got it. Definitely. And I would say that one last thing, like the value you drive doesn't have to be like this revolutionary idea or like a total game changer. So many people lead with emails with their palm out asking for something. And so if you're just the person who consistently shows up in their inbox every couple of weeks, like offering some sort of value, you immediately stand out. So I think a lot of times people don't reach out at all because they think like, this person has all the resources, the connections, the job, everything already. What could I offer?
So let me actually, can I ask you, I build upon this? Okay. For example of value, because I never thought about doing it strictly through email. Okay. And I have a couple people that I'm speaking with, but let's say that I want to get a job working at a cloud accounting firm. Okay. And I owned a company where I hired cloud accounting firms. Okay. And I had to fire cloud accounting firms because they were not actually solving my business problem. And then I had to take the accounting function in-house. Okay. Yep. I learned it on my own. I hired people that were smarter than me. I have a lot of experience with starting up accounting systems and doing this stuff. And there is a company that is on the forefront of this, scaling the accounting and financial function, dealing with startups, being the outsourced CFO. Okay.
Yep.
Now, because I've been on the client side, I knew things that, maybe people who had never hired companies like that would know. So let's say that some of the value I have is, understanding the customer pain points. Maybe do I just take a guess and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know, I'm curious if you guys are doing this at the company. I found that when I had companies servicing me and the chart of accounts was not detailed enough or off, or they didn't check in with me, or they weren't able to answer questions, or, in other words, give them something which could enable them to deliver better customer service and add them value in a way that shows that I know something about what they do? Or is it more take a step back and, take a step back and just send them an article that's about cryptocurrency because they're into cryptocurrency accounting? Right?
Both are great avenues. I personally would choose the route that taps into your personal experience. So yeah. I just did the success story I sent out last week with a lady named Queen. She reached out to a CEO and she basically said, I'm a big fan of your product. I'm a big fan of your company. I've tried it out, and I noticed X, Y, and Z things could be done a lot better. I didn't really receive the support that I needed to use your product properly, and I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Right.
And in my past, I've been a customer success consultant. So here's a laundry list of things that I would recommend you guys implement that are, dead easy, low hanging fruit. But if you guys implement these, I guarantee you're going to see higher customer satisfaction rates. You're going to see, more money because you're driving more value with your product. You're going to see longer lifetime. You're going to see all these great things, and I can prove that out for you. And she fired that off, and that started the conversation that ended up leading to a job offer. So,
okay. So another example spinning off of that could be if they're starting to do Facebook Lives and they have things that says 5 things you can do to streamline your accounting, right?
Yep.
And I have 5 or 10 ideas on what I think would be good for an audience. Okay. Yep. Because people have asked me to help them with the same solution. I could offer them different Facebook Live ideas or something. Yep. Or I could offer them, I could call the business being like a potential client, go through the sales experience of asking the questions, and then show them that I actually called the company. Now, I kind of have like an integrity thing. Let's say I'm not actually going to purchase their services. Do I just call up and pretend, you know what, I just use my old company as an example. Hi, on a venue in New York City and the accounting function, we need to scale it a bit better. Can you guys help with that? And then interact with the salesperson. Should I just do that even though I'm not going to sign up, and then I can learn their sales process, what's working well, what's not?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If you call them up and there's obvious gaps in their process and you point it out to them, I mean, what you have to be careful about in some of these situations is calling their baby ugly. So they may think that their process is fantastic. So you just want to, I think if you lead with what you said, I used to run a company that did this, and we saw consistently like this mistake being making. And
yes.
when we fix that, here's the result, quantitative or at least as close as you can get. Yeah, I think if you do that, that's a fantastic place to start for sure.
And then the last thing was I actually did that with a CEO. Believe it or not, there's a company in Atlanta which is dry cleaning.
Yep.
And I just moved down here and I'm in an apartment building and they have lockers. And there was moisture on the lockers from being located near the outside of the garage.
Yeah.
And I was throwing out some cardboard boxes. I saw this guy cleaning the lockers. And I said, hey, it's really good that you're cleaning the lockers. I haven't used the service yet because of the moisture. Then he introduced himself as a CEO. And then 15 minutes later, I had a cup of coffee with him scheduled. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So because I talked about services in New York City that I use and Cleanly and what makes his business different. So you're saying this can be done over email.
Yeah.
It doesn't 100%. Have to happen in a conversation. Just offer whatever value or insight or observation, and that's going to make it stand out.
Hey, Austin.
Yep. Yeah.
Hi. By the way, hi. It's Kushid. I'm finally able to join you.
Sure.
This is awesome. I love the conversation. I just had one question.
Sure.
So assume you do provide this type of value that's relevant to them, pertinent to your experience. What's the thinking along? I mean, do you want to provide them kind of all the information that you have for them, or do you want to sort of do it in like a phased manner because you're trying to build, interest back from them? Because I could also potentially see a situation where, for example, let's say there's an app that I think, I have some value to offer, and I reach out to, the CEO or the product manager, director, whatever, and I say, hey, there's all this stuff that I think you could really improve, would be better, a customer experience, so on. What's to prevent them from saying, sure, great, thank you, and that's the end of it?
So I think the best thing to do is it's a balance. You want to make sure that you're giving enough info to help yourself stand out, to trigger a response. I mean, you can go for it and dump everything into one single consolidated document or whatever and send it out. And that's kind of a gamble. It's, high risk, high reward. There's definitely times where, I mean, it's happened to me. It's happened to a lot of people I know, even with the strategy that I write about on the site. Like, people have put together these massive projects, send them out, and haven't heard from anybody. It increases your chances. There's no guarantee that just email or just phone calls or trying to catch them for coffee or whatever is going to work. So like the cold email thing works very well for me. And it's worked very well for other people, but I'll also say that in some cases, people that I wanted to get in touch with, it hasn't worked for. So I had to find a different route. But to answer your question, if it were me, I would start with a teaser. So I would give like 30%. I don't know if you can quantify it, but I would throw a little bit out there and see what happens, see if they're interested. And then you can use also the email tracker. So you can see, you know, if they open it once, never again, then you have a decision to make. Do I throw the whole thing out there? Do I just stop reaching out to them and try something else? But if they're biting a little bit and they're sort of engaged or opening the email across a couple of days, you can also follow up with them and be like, hey, I saw that, you know, you may be interested in this. You want to talk about it more? By the way, here's the extra 30%. So now we're 60% of the way there. And then you still have value left over to give when you finally meet them. So that's probably what I would do. Typically, it escalated with the amount of time that I hadn't heard back from them. So I would put out a little bit. If I hadn't heard back from them for a couple of weeks, then I put out a little bit more, until finally, usually for some of these people, if I really, really want to get in touch with them, I would just put together something that would be incredibly hard to ignore. And yeah, if they still didn't get back to me after that, I usually tabled it and tried again later, especially like when you're on your career path or you're starting a business or whatever, you'll find that different stages will open up different doors. And so like people that I could have never gotten in touch with 2 years ago, like I talk to regularly now. And it's just a matter of timing and also what I'm able to offer and the way that I'm able to approach it. My network has grown, et cetera, et cetera. So it should be pretty low drag to do this because you're only doing it every couple of weeks. But the kicker is that what's going to really improve your chances is like truly understanding their problem. And that's what requires some research. So like, I guess a good example would be there's another career coach out there. His name is Raghav Haran. And I think he's still doing stuff. But anyways, he wanted to work with this author. His name is Neil Strauss. He's written a couple New York Times bestsellers. And he'd sent emails to Neil and hadn't heard anything back. He'd been sending emails for a couple months. And he'd sent a few little projects. And so Neil did an Ask Me Anything on Reddit. And Raghav was scrolling through the comments and he found one section where Neil was like talking to somebody. They were going back and forth on the thread. And he was like, yeah, I actually created this forum for what you're talking about, but I couldn't seem to drive interest to it. And I'm actually thinking about shutting it down. But I thought it was a really cool idea. So Raghav took that, he sent Neil an email and he basically said, hey, in your Ask Me Anything, I saw that you wanted to drive more traffic to this forum and you thought it was a cool idea. I think it's a cool idea. And I've done that in the past, similar to what we were talking about with Steve, where, you know, you leverage some experience that you've already had. You say, we ran into the same problem. Here are a couple ways to fix that. I also have 15 more if you want to hop on the phone and chat. You know, what do you say? And Neil's assistant emailed Raghav back after that shortly, a couple days later. So you can escalate in value and just make sure, like the number one thing is making sure you really understand what would be valuable to them, what they're going to respond to. And then if you can frame it up like that, you're good to go.
Cool. Thank you. That's super helpful.
No problem. No problem.
Awesome. So, I know I reached out to you yesterday because I just found out, I just came across your website. And it's so funny because I wish I had seen it maybe a few hours earlier. I applied for a job that I really want. I know I kind of shared a little bit with you as to what, you know, I want to get into, like business culture consulting and switch into that industry. So I saw a company that I think would honestly be a perfect, everything about them. It just really seems like it would be amazing. And had already put in my application. And then, of course, I came across your article. I was like, darn it. So now that that's already done, I went on LinkedIn. Turns out, I don't know why I didn't think of this earlier, but turns out a few people that I met at the Tampa Bay Startup Week conference know some of the people that work there. I did talk to two of them today, and they don't really know them directly. They're like other kind of like recruiters, so they just kind of know them of them. So I don't think that there's really anything there. There is like a video one-way interview, which I'd never heard of before. So I'll probably do that after we hop off of this.
Yeah.
Is there like, would it be too much for me? I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with, I would assume that you are, but Gary Vee, so he spoke last week at the conference, and I just found out about him 2 months ago. He talks so much like you're saying about giving, adding value, and that's totally my heart. And I would do anything, like it would probably be a huge pay cut. I wouldn't even care. Like, it's just so my heart. So what I want to follow that, I'm like, if I have to clean, can I vacuum? Can I take out the trash? Do I need to clean a toilet? Do I just need to bake cookies and bring them? Whatever I could do just to get my foot in the door to, and I wonder, like, is that too desperate? Should I just wait until I hear back? And if I don't get anything, then maybe follow up with hey, could you share anything that would make it better? And, and I'd be willing to do anything, by the way, or I don't know, what are your thoughts?
So you're talking about the company you applied to, not working for Gary Vaynerchuk, right?
No, that would be amazing.
I've talked to people about it. So it's, no question is too far-fetched, but yeah. So what I'd recommend.
By the way, I would love to like shadow Claude Silver for like a day or two, but that might be a bit further down the line.
Yeah, you and me both. But what I'd recommend is if you have contacts there, I would reach out to them and I would just pick their brain about if they're willing to and you feel comfortable about stuff that the company is going through. So initiatives that are coming up, challenges they're having, anything in that vein. I wouldn't reach out and you shouldn't do this. Speaking of cold email or networking or anything else, don't ask people how you can help them. People think that it's like it's different. I mean, I guess it's one step better than asking them for something for yourself. But it's general. Like, people ask me all the time, Austin, how can I help you? And I have like 17 million things that I need to do right now, but I can't just like train you all up on all the knowledge that I have and then you can help me kind of thing. And it's the same. So people tend to gloss over it, is my point. So what I recommend is trying to figure out exactly what their pain points are, what initiatives they have, and then create something that adds value against it. So to give another example here, I really like this one actually. So there's a college student. She's a girl up at Northeastern, and she wanted an internship at Airbnb. So she applied and sent emails to the CEOs and people there, blah, 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 and didn't hear back. So she went and polled the customer actually. And that is always a great thing to do. Like, if you can't get a hold of somebody at the company and you want to figure out what their challenges are, go find some of their customers and talk to those people. Because if no customer is afraid to like complain about a company, tell you what they're doing right, tell you what they're doing wrong. They're pretty unbiased. So she went out, talked to the customers, found a couple pain points on social media. She pasted those into a deck. She took screenshots and then she offered up solutions. She like physically built them out, and then she fired that deck off to the same people. So she waited a couple weeks, just like we talked about earlier. They fired off this deck as a follow-up and just said, hey, I know that you guys are having these issues and I know how to solve them. Here are 2 solutions. I would love to talk to you if you have a couple minutes. sense. In your case, you could say, you know, I threw in my application and I would absolutely love to work for you guys, dream job, blah, blah, blah. But lead with value and make sure the value is specific. Like, hey, Lauren, I'd love to help you with anything. And, or somebody comes to you and says, hey, Lauren, I know that you have this issue and here's a solution that I have experience working on and I know it works and I know it's going to work for you. Here you go. Who are you going to pick? Number 2, 10 times out of 10, right? So you want to be that person. And obviously you don't have all the inside info. You're not an employee. So you just want to get as much information as you can. And really our goal, like if we solve that problem, that is like, that's the jackpot, right? That's like winning the lottery. But what we're really going for here is showing them that, you know, everybody else out there is applying with, and they're, you know, they're basically banking on their resume, their cover letter, maybe a referral from somebody, whatever. But that's what they're banking on. They're hoping that experience is going to carry them through. And then in the interviews, they'll be able to do a good job. But if you show up and even if you don't solve their number one problem, but you show that you cared enough to research and find out what their problems are, put something together, some sort of solutions, make it look nice, show that you are enthusiastic about their brand, you're invested in the company's success, and you're not afraid to like roll up your sleeves and dive in and get your hands dirty. That is what's going to set you apart. If you end up solving somebody's problem on top of it, like that's the gold mine. But even just putting something together and firing it off and taking that initiative, that's going to bring you a long way. So that's what I'd recommend doing in your situation.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, that's really good. One last quick kind of follow-up question to that would be, since I already have essentially submitted the application, is it something, would you recommend just waiting until I've kind of heard back? Because who knows, like if I get it, great then, or should I, you know, should I just be preemptive or should I like yeah, okay. Get
started. See if you can contact people over there, see if you can get some info. Do some research of your own, like hit up their blog. It doesn't sound like, I don't know if they're a public company. If they're a public company, you can try and check out their earnings statements. You can use, there's a site called seekingalpha.com. And if they're public, that people will be writing about their stock. There's a whole bunch of ways, but basically just do a bunch of research. If you can talk to their customers, try to get out there and talk to some customers. But I wouldn't worry too much about the timing, because if they say, if you really like, if this is your dream job and you, like you said, are willing to sweep the floors, if they tell you no, like don't accept that. Like go out there, show them why that you not only deserve a yes, but like you demand a yes. Like they would be stupid to hire somebody else, because here's all the value that you can provide and you put it on a platter for them. That's basically the mentality you want to have.
Okay, I like that. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I'll let you get to someone else, but thank you. I appreciate it.
So only I wanted to add in was this, is that she had mentioned that she had applied, via, the traditional method. Mm-hmm. And so, sometimes people do that. And so another strategy I think that you've spoken on before is that using software where, say, for example, there's a job posting. So say, for example, if it's on a company website, so say, for example, Amazon or Microsoft or whatever.
Yep.
And have the posting up. One way to make sure that your resume gets to the top of the list is using software where it picks up most the top, I guess, couple keywords that are in the job posting and making sure that it's inside of your resume.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great tactic. I think, Lauren, you already applied, right? So you're onto the interview phase. Yeah. So that's great because you got through the door.
Right.
So no need to worry. But that's a great tip, Michael, for anybody else out there who, I mean, applying online is fine. Like all the stuff I throw on the site about not applying online is true in my opinion, but also sounds very nice from a marketing standpoint.
Right.
But I always tell anybody I coach, anybody who comes to the course, anything like that, like you should still apply online because you never know. Like somebody, you shouldn't just block out a channel just because the chances are small. I just don't recommend that you spend a ton of time focusing on making sure that should I use this one word or this one word in my resume? Or like, is this line going to be better than this line? Like,
because there's no perfect formula.
Send it in, and then focus your time on what we talked about at the beginning of the call, getting in touch with people, driving value.
Most definitely.
Yeah, that's what's really gonna set you apart.
And then another strategy that's really helpful too, Austin, is that, once you, I don't know if a lot of people have the template, but, once they have their resume all put together, you recommend that not just yourself, well, using the Grammarly app, making sure that
Mhm.
there's aren't any errors.
Yeah.
And then, going over it a couple times, but, also having a couple people view it that's, that you trust. But also another strategy that I used is that I have a very good HR friend. So she's a high level. She owns her own HR company,
Mhm.
and so passing the resume off to someone who does HR as a professional, just in the sense of it's just another tool, just in the sense of they can look at it and tell you within a couple minutes, yay or nay, in a sense of, because they're professionals at, looking at a resume within a couple of seconds and saying, oh, yeah, this is one that is easy to read, or point out mistakes, or if there's a misspelling. This is, their industry in which they work in day and day out.
Yeah, I totally agree. That's a good call. If you have a friend who's in recruiting, but I think the kicker is if you try, I don't think it's necessarily worth the time to try and make a friend in recruiting.
No. I'm not saying if
but
you
I think
do.
you're right, if you have them.
And ironically, that's kind
Go
of the
ahead.
job I'm applying for.
Is recruiting?
No, but it's called living HR. It's
Oh,
I mean,
nice.
it's culture, but it's called yeah. So
It's a great industry to be in now. I have a couple of friends who just got jobs in a similar space. I don't really recommend reaching out to recruiters.
I agree.
In general.
100%.
Yeah.
I can tell you so many horror stories about that.
And that's the thing. I think people tend to think that when you reach out to a recruiter, like, oh, I'm getting in touch with the person and they can funnel me in or whatever. But there's two things that I don't like about that. The first is that recruiters are basically the human version of an online application. Like their inbox is jam packed with mail. So the chances of yours getting read are very slim. And then on top of that, they're the gatekeeper. So they can get you an interview, but they have zero say in the final decision.
Right.
Like the people who have a say in the final decision are the manager or your colleague, the people that you're going to interview with down the line. So in my opinion, it's way more valuable and efficient to reach out to those people and build relationships with them. But I do know I get emails from people all the time that are like, I sent a recruiter an email and I haven't heard back. I'm like, yeah.
They don't care. They don't care. I'm not trying to be negative or anything, but
totally. And I'm not trying to. I agree. We're on the same page, man.
They just don't care. Almost like before I met Austin, almost like I used to do the same thing. I get a email from recruiter, and they're like, oh, we saw your resume. Contact me back. I would phone and email back and not hear nothing back from the recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's just like, okay, this is just a waste of time,
Yeah, 100%.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, no problem.
Hey, Austin, I need to get going. I just wanted to be on the beginning part of the of this call, but I have another meeting to get to. But I just wanted to be on the beginning part of it.
No problem, man. Take care.
All right, take care. Nice meeting everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya. Good luck.
Thanks.
Anne, I got your question here in the chat box. So you interview for a company and then you send them a thank you note a few minutes after it's done, which is awesome. Thank you notes are great. And the interviewer tells you that they'll get back to you next steps in about 2 to 3 weeks. What's the best way to follow up and keep engaged with the company? That's a great question. So the first thing is I would give them the time that they mentioned, unless you have a very compelling reason to follow up with them after. So I always recommend that when you are interviewing, that you basically spend time trying to break the professional wall or whatever and make the relationship a little bit more personal. So that could be leading off the interview with a personal anecdote or conversation or getting that started. It could be at the end with some of the questions you ask them, whatever that may be, like being able to break down, because when you walk in the room, it's usually, unless you have like a very cool interviewer, it's usually like pretty professional, pretty rigid, right? But you can proactively go ahead and shift that mood to something that's a little bit more personal, a little bit more casual. So typically, if you can do that and do it well, and you get some info about them, like maybe you know that, again, challenges, goals, initiatives, those are all great things to cover. And if you can figure out a little bit about that, then you can follow up with something even beforehand, and you can call it out too. So if you want to stay engaged with them, you could do something, and you're within the 2 to 3 weeks, you could send them an email and say something like, hey, I know you guys are, you said 2 to 3 weeks, it's only been 1, no worries, but I found this cool article, or I found this podcast, or I found this person that's really relevant to what we talked about. And I thought it was really interesting, so I wanted to send it over to you. Anyways, have a great weekend. And that keeps you engaged, but you proactively called out, like, I know that it hasn't been 2 to 3 weeks yet. I'm not asking to follow up on my app. Like, I'm just trying to keep the relationship going. So that's a good way to do it. If you're outside the 2 to 3 weeks and you haven't heard back from them at all, I would still take the same approach, where you try to find something valuable, and follow up with that. You can always, the same thing that I recommended to Lauren, where you're building out this value add project, same thing I recommend to everybody, that can come in at any point. So it can be preemptive. Like in Lauren's situation, she applied, she hasn't heard back yet. That could be the tipping point that pushes people to bring her in for a final round interview. If you're in the interview process, it could be the tipping point to give you the offer. Or if you're post interview and you're waiting to hear back, you can still put together that project, and now you actually have specific contacts that you can reach out to. So it works at every stage of the process. So I always recommend doing it. And I always recommend, like, now that you guys know, from the very beginning, like day one, when you find a job that you're excited about, company you're excited about, like, keep your brain tuned to stuff that you hear about them. Do a little bit of research and just find ways to add value. And if you're in the job search and you're interviewing and applying to a whole bunch of places, like, it doesn't take long to get your brain tuned to start, like, picking up on these things naturally. And once you do that, like, this will come a lot easier. And once you do a couple of these projects, like, you'll be able to build them a lot faster. The first one's always slow because you're not sure. And, you get stuck on questions like, do I do a PowerPoint deck, or do I do a one-sheeter, or like, how do I make this happen? But once you do a couple of them and you get comfortable, they come a bit more naturally. So I get started as early as possible. If you guys put something together, like, send it to me. I'm more than happy to look over it and give you feedback and let you know what I think. So if you're in doubt and it's kind of paralyzing you from taking action, like, hit me up, send me an email, and like, we can work through that together. I can give you some direction, but then follow up with that. So if the first thing you can do is just email back and say, hey, I found this article or whatever, like, hope you're doing well. Looking forward to hearing more about next steps. And then again, email tracker is still good here. If they're opening it, if they're engaged, and then you don't hear back from them for a week later, then you can follow up with the project if you need a couple weeks to put it together. And then if you still don't hear back from them, the last thing you can do, it's a tactic that people use in sales, but it's basically like the close the file email. So in sales, you basically email somebody and say, hey, if I don't hear back from you, I'm going to close your file. And that typically gets people who are on the fence to respond. You can do the same thing with them. And you can say, hey, it's been a couple weeks and I'm really excited about the role. However, I am having conversations with a couple other companies and I haven't heard back from you guys. If I don't hear back from you in, X number of days, in the next 2 days or 3 days, I'm probably going to have to go elsewhere. So just wanted to let you know ahead of time, best of luck finding the right candidate. And so when you give them the ultimatum, that kind of puts them in a position to respond or not. I mean, you gave them a 2-day window. So if you don't hear from them in 2 days, you know that it's done. But if you do hear from them, then you can kind of pick it back up from there. But that tactic works pretty well. So if you have the project available, if you've taken the time to do it, I would lead with that. If you need to buy time, just send a quick follow-up and tell them that you're really looking forward to stuff. Ask them, or just say you're looking forward to next steps. If there's anything else you can provide, like, no problem. And then you can lead up, or you can finalize things. If you hadn't heard from them for like maybe a couple weeks after they were supposed to get back from you, then you can send them the hey, I really appreciate it. Haven't heard from you. I'm currently talking to other people and I may have to fully invest my time in there and close this out. type of email. So that's what I'd recommend there. And if you have any questions about writing them or wording them or whatever, like feel free to send me an email. I'm definitely happy to help. And I think we had one more question coming here. Brian, I'll unmute you, man. I think I can do that. Just give me a second here. This always gets funky. Hey, Brian.
Hi, Austin. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. You want to ask a question out loud here?
Yeah, sorry for writing a book.
No, it's all good.
I had a question centered around, so I've done the applying online, I've gone to networking events, and I'm trying to transition out of the insurance and financial services space that I've been part of for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been a challenge in regards to getting noticed to make the transition and kind of get connected with hiring managers where I have a lot of advice meetings, but not a lot of traction from there. Do you have any suggestions or ideas how to leverage it with your approach?
How to leverage my approach?
How do you leverage your approach kind of with this thought process, or kind of how I'm going about it?
Okay, so how have you been going about it thus far? Like, what have you been doing?
I've done LinkedIn invites, just sending personalized messages. Some people are in the process of introducing me to people in this space. I've been to networking events, just talking to people, letting them know I'm looking to transition, and then some cold emails, here and there. But
okay,
that's
and how's the cold email going?
On the LinkedIn messages, I have about a 25% response rate when I do them, so not bad in terms of, it takes, like you were saying, some time to sometimes it takes 3 or 4 times before you hear anything.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned LinkedIn mail. Is the 25% for LinkedIn mail or email?
LinkedIn.
Okay. And have you heard back email wise or no?
Email, not as great.
Okay. Interesting. So typically I see better responses via email, but it all depends on, where they spend their time and how you're wording it, et cetera. So what I'd recommend, first of all, is I would pick a couple people who can really influence where you want to go. So it sounds like we're doing a little bit of a spray and pray here, which I totally understand the methodology there. But if I would recommend picking a couple people who are high up and very close to the roles that you want. So do you have specific roles in mind, specific companies, et cetera?
Yeah, like regional sales leadership,
Okay.
Regional type sales, kind of middle. I guess I'd be kind of middle. I struggle with that too in terms of making a transition from one industry to the next in terms of where do you fall. I have 20 years of sales experience in sales leadership, so got a lot of experience. It just isn't relevant,
Yeah. Is that right? All right. Cool. So yeah, what I'd recommend doing is getting out. 20 years of experience is fantastic. And like I was saying to Stephen before, that background, you just have to spin it in a positive light. People, for whatever reason, people are wired to think that hey, you did 20 years of sales, but since you did it in this tangentially related industry, it basically doesn't count. Sorry. Which is bullshit, because sales is sales. If you can sell a pen, or you can sell, software, you can sell healthcare, you can sell anything. They're core fundamentals, right? So, what I'd recommend is, again, scour LinkedIn, find people who would be the manager for those roles you're looking at, or other regional managers, et cetera. And I would start specifically finding those people and email them. What are you using the template that I have in my article, or are you just kind of writing it yourself?
I'll certainly try yours. I haven't instituted that yet. I just have kind of come up with something that I kind of customize each situation. And if I notice something on their LinkedIn profile, like went to the same school like you were talking about, or something, I mentioned that too.
Yeah, so that's definitely the way to go. If you can find the point of commonality, I'd start there. And then, I just start firing off emails to these people. I think, how many emails have you sent, would you say?
Collectively, I do about 4 to 5 a day.
Okay.
And then some days up to 8, just depending.
Okay, and how many total do you think? Are you close to like 50, 100, 20?
Quite a few. Yeah, I don't know. I have the spreadsheet of all the outreaches and everything, but I'm targeting like 100 people.
Okay, and do you use the email tracker?
No, I gotta, I have to check into that actually. That'd be a good thing.
For sure. And how often are you following up with these people?
I do about once a week in terms of when I send it out, and then a week later, about 5 to 7 business days, I'm sending another follow up again.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so you're doing most of the right stuff. The only remaining piece I'd say is the template, and I guess if we're talking response rate, it comes down to the template as like the remaining piece there. So you and I can take it offline too, and we can work on that together. You can send me an email. But
Awesome.
I mean, I'd recommend, especially in your case, like same thing I talked about with Steven. When you get into the more, when you have a little bit more experience, it definitely helps to lead with some value and showcase your experience, because that's what's in question, right? Like,
Yep.
It's a different industry, so you just need to prove out, like, you know what their product is, you know who their audience is, you know how to sell it. So I would try and find some of these regional managers, or somebody who'd be your manager. I would do some research on the company again, same stuff that I mentioned before. Like, if are these public companies?
Most of them are, yes.
Okay, cool. So you can find a ton of information on them. So they're going to have their earnings statements. They're going to have notes, letters to shareholders. Some of them might even have an earnings call that you can listen in on. That's a great place to start to understand where they're struggling and what they think is the best route to overcome that. I mentioned this site a couple of times on the call, but it's Seeking Alpha, SEEKING alpha.com. And it's basically like a consolidated investor blog. So people can write articles about specific stocks, and there's all sorts of opinions why, this company is great, why it sucks, why it's doing this or that. And you can actually sign up for alerts for every company, and they'll send a digest to your inbox every day. So that's a good passive way to get information fed to you. And then I just start thinking, how can I add value? And so if you're reaching out to a couple hundred people and you're not hearing back, I'd instead start by narrowing the search and then increasing the value. So instead of going very wide and shallow, I'd go narrow and deep. And just do that research. Again, we can talk about it too. Like, if you want to send me an email with the companies and some of the stuff you've done, some of the stuff you found out, or some of the stuff that you put together, we can work through that. But basically, we want to find a way. We want to figure out what they're struggling with. We want to find ways that your experience is relevant to that. And then we want to figure a way to package that and fire it off to some of these people. But it's a very consultative approach, and that's typically what works best when you're kind of at the level you are, compared to, it works at all levels, but typically that's like table stakes when you're playing in the area level of experience that you're at.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Cool. No problem. Send me an email, and let's talk about it some more.
Okay. Will
Cool.
do.
All right, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for joining me. This was a blast. I'm glad we had so many people, so many good questions. So I'm going to edit and cut this, and I'll send it all out on Monday. So if you guys want to listen to the answers or rewatch or whatever, it'll be available forever after it's posted up on YouTube. So you guys have a great rest of the week. And if you have any questions, always feel free to email me, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks so much.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Dustin.
Dustin.
Thank
Bye.
you.